And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 623, as we chug along in the fantasy baseball season to get you ready for the 2024 season. Happy New Year. It's early January. If you haven't started listening to the preview podcast, so here you go. We're back for a non-preview episode, more of a fantasy baseball, let's see how things are going episode. We'll review Hot Stove as usual and talk about some early DCOC situations out there in the NFBC landscape. In order to do so, I have a special guest joining me tonight. First time he's been on the show. I got to know him over the recent years, but especially last year as we duked it out in a DC and ended up in the last second due to a stat change or something, ended up tying the league after I already got DM messages saying, "How did you pass me in this league?" Yeah. And then it came back to reality. So we're going to have a lot of fun on this show. I'm looking forward to it. You can follow him on Twitter at Nicholi Knutson. It's Nicholi. How are we doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm glad you brought that DC up because I was like, we got to at least talk about this briefly because I was like, we hadn't talked a whole lot, and I was obviously knew who you were and congratulate you. I was also a little upset because I was like, man, I was kind of in front for a while in that league, and then your team was great too because it was really high, I think high in the overall, and then that last day you passed me, and I was like, man, like one of those last day. Like, can't believe I fell to second, and then was congratulating you, and then happened to look, and I don't even remember what the stat correction was. No. It somehow made me jump back up and tie you. So, kind of wild, but
yeah, it was something else because I remember that it was like going for the last month or so. I was kind of paying more and more attention, and you were always in the lead. But I was in the lead in the overall, so I'm sitting there just kind of getting frustrated. Like, this makes no sense to me. What are we doing? And because you had I think a ton of hitting stats, like you're crushing hitting, and I was doing whatever, something like that. And we kept going back. I was kind of creeping. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get him. I'll take second. That's cool and all. And then I got it, and I got your message. I'm like, okay, sweet. And then I'm looking it up right now because the bullpen guru Dom, I remember this very clearly. He messaged me. This is what got my attention. It was something like I'm trying to see where it was, but I can't even find it. But he mentioned, hey, just so you know, because he was in the league with us, there was a stat correction. You tied for first now, and I'm like, what?
Oh shoot, that's how you found out.
Yeah, I didn't even know because I thought I stopped looking. I'm like, done is done because it wasn't the same day. It felt like it was like a day later or something. And when the stat correction came in, and I'm just like, oh crap. But I was like, oh, whatever, we'll split it. Cool. I guess that's fair. You had the better team pretty much all year. I had the overall team to split it and call it a day.
Yeah, no, it's a good story, but it's definitely, I mean, I don't know. How often does that actually happen? Like and cause you to take a step back and tie with somebody. But oh well, if it I don't know. Fun to be able to get to know you. I'll take that as a side win. So
Yep, it's all good there. How did the season turn out for you last year, all things considered?
Yeah, it was a profitable year. Obviously I know everybody plays it for different reasons. Since I mostly play just because I enjoy fantasy quite a bit, right? Getting to know people. Got introduced to I know we'll probably talk about that later, but a few years ago, and I just kind of got hooked like a lot of us. And but last year was good. It was probably one of my better years. My main event I had won was awful. Other than that, everything else was pretty good. I'm trying to remember now. I think I cashed in like 9 or 10 of my 20 teams, and I don't know, something like that. But so can't complain. I'm looking forward to drafting here until opening day.
Yeah, and we'll get to all that as you mentioned. But before we get to the fun stuff of getting to know Nicholi a little more and some early draft thoughts, let's get over the hot stove, which we do each and every episode on Bench with Bubba. And it's been kind of slow of late, as you can tell by the names we're going to discuss here shortly. It's been pretty quiet, but we did get Lucas Giolito signed with the Boston Red Sox, and it was kind of one of those, where was he going to go after such a horrific season, especially the way he finished the year in Cleveland and Anaheim? It's pretty rough, but it's obviously been documented as well, the struggles he had on and off the field. So we'll see where that goes. But what's your thoughts now on Giolito going to Boston? Are we excited about it? Are we neutral on it? It does have an ADP of 221 over the last month in DCs, which is pretty nice. So what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, he's kind of grouped in with a few of these, guys who used to be pretty elite in fantasy. You think of him. I'm sure we'll talk about Sale later. Rodon, just these guys who used to be great now have question marks, concerns for us as fantasy managers. I personally, I mean, I get the ADP, and we're talking about DCs a little bit more today. He should give you innings, which always having a quote unquote reliable arm matters in a format like that. I'm personally out even at 220. That's just me. I get the appeal for some strikeouts in the innings. To me, I'd almost rather just take a chance on Lance Lynn, who's also pretty gross later. But I feel like similar maybe production, what you're going to get. I think the home run problem scares me a lot, and he's going to a worse park. Or I think for home runs, Boston might be a little more neutral. But overall, I think worse park. And unless his velo bumps back up, which, it could, I just don't see anything in the underlying numbers that made me be too optimistic. I think with some of these other guys, like Sale, who we might talk about later, I can at least see some things that makes me go, man, if he just stayed healthy, he could maybe be some version of Chris Sale again. I don't know with Giolito if I see that, but so I'm probably just not drafting him this year. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm torn. I know early draft season, I wanted nothing to do with him. Wanted to see where he went, all those kind of things. I did pick up one share recently. I still only, I guess, the only share. And one of the big reasons I did it is, like you mentioned, like as I was building my roster, his innings and strikeouts were going to be a big plus to what I needed on that roster. And hopefully he can figure something out. Now that's still a big hope. Like he came out in his press conference finally, and he said he's been working with I don't think it was Driveline, but he's got a guy, and they already noticed the differences from his like really good seasons to how he was looking last season mechanically. They're trying to go back to the other system basically, and he's going to work on it. Now we loved it. Everyone's going to say that in the offseason, so we have to kind of grain of salt that one. But he's just one of those guys that he's still young enough where I'm thinking, okay, maybe we could take a chance at this time. I'm not going to go all in. I'm not going to draft him everywhere. That's for darn sure. And in reality, he might be a better fit to draft in a fab league where if he sucks, you just drop him. In a DC, you're just stuck rostering him, and you're just like, it's a dead roster spot at that point.
That's a good point. And sometimes in those DCs, injuries pile up and you're forced to start guys that might crush your ratios just because you need a live body, right? And to your point, LC, you'll probably know pretty quick if he's turning around or not. And if he hasn't at the price, it's not going to hurt you to just drop and move on probably. So
yeah, those first few like spring training outings where we see the velocity readings, that'll be very telling. And trust me, Twitter will let us all know, and his ADP will rise. So that'll be always the entertaining thing. You mentioned Chris Sale, and I'm kind of excited about this one because I was already interested in Chris Sale after the way it wasn't like an amazing season, but just seeing him out there throwing, being a little bit more like Chris Sale at times. He gets traded to the Braves. The Braves send Vaughn Grissom to Boston. We'll talk about Grissom in a minute. What's your thoughts on Sale? Like his ADP is 170, so it's 50 picks before Giolito, but still, going to Atlanta, much better ball club, maybe a better ballpark potentially. We'll see. Not a great ballpark, but what's your thoughts on Sale?
Yeah, it's something you'll probably notice as we talk a little bit here today. I'm kind of a little bit more willing to take risk on guys like Sale, who obviously we know the concerns, right? The bad is, can he stay healthy? He hasn't pitched hardly at all for 3-4 years. When I'm talking about Giolito, like I said, I was mentioning things that I just didn't see a lot of optimism in his skills. Whereas the big if he can actually pitch, I think there's still a lot of double-digit strikeouts a lot last year, close to it, 8K outings. The K percentage, I think, was around 30%, still elite. I don't know. I still see a lot there. You go to the Braves, it's a team that wins are unpredictable, but obviously they're going to rack them up. So again, if he can stay healthy, he could provide, a good amount of that for you. If it stays at the 170, you mentioned, I know the 170, I like that price range. I'm curious to see as the weeks and months go on, where does that start to creep up to? I noticed there was a draft the other day. He went like 126, pretty big difference. I think in an OC, I'd probably still be fine taking him there because I'm willing to take the risk and try to get a difference maker in an OC. And if it burns me, it's easier to kind of make it up in Fab, right? So, I think the 170 range is exciting for me personally, but I don't know what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, I definitely I am. I have a few shares. The 126, I'm a little more slower to be attracted to that ADP. I just noticed, that's his high over the last month. or as low, I guess, of 126. So that kind of I have to do some more thinking on that one. But the reason I liked the move for a couple reasons is, you got Strider, you got Fried. Who knows if Morton comes back or not? He's got the option. He hasn't really said he's coming back. That leaves Sale as the 3 or the 4, which is so much better than him having to be the ace for one. He can work back into his innings, maybe give you 150 innings still. And what you mentioned, the underlying stuff, we saw the strikeout rate, like you mentioned. Velo wasn't bad. The big thing that could be a quick change potentially is one of his worst ground ball rates ever. And that's what led to all the home runs he gave up. Like if that just kind of shifts back a little bit, now your ratio drops back down to the normal Chris Sale range because the whip was still fine. Like there's a lot to like about Chris Sale. So I'm with you on that one. I think there's even 126 if he gets those adjustments could be a nice little play there as like an SP3 potentially, especially in an OC or something. And we'll get to your games you play. I know you play OCs and everything. You play all formats almost, but like that OC, you could definitely take those chances a little more in that range, and that's a little bit more exciting. Vaughn Grissom now. This is a guy that was kind of been without a home for a while. He was maybe going to platoon with Jared Kelenic in Atlanta in the outfield. Now he looks to be the second baseman in Boston, and I've always just kind of had him off my board because I didn't know if he'd ever play. Now he'll at least play every day. ADP of 371, as high as 232 over the last month. So what's your thoughts on Grissom here?
Yeah, he's interesting, right? Last year, I feel like just one of those buzz players, right? Where before the season starting, you're trying to predict like how much he's going to play. He's in a great offense, so he starts to climb, and then it's like, oh, wait a second, he's not even going to get everyday playing time, and he hardly plays at all for him. But we still know what he offers, and in fantasy, it's definitely enticing, right? They've said he should be the everyday middle, or I think he should play every day with Story in the middle infield. So, power speed combo, we like that middle infield, right? Obviously, he's still young, unproven. But again, I think the Red Sox as a whole, just in that lineup, I feel like they're going to bounce back. To what extent, I don't know. But I do like, a lot of the guys in that lineup, Duran, Yoshida, Devers, of course, Casas, who everybody loves. I just think there's a lot of opportunity for that lineup to grow. And if he's going to get everyday ABs, I think he's a good pick in that area that you just mentioned. And somebody I brought up just in my notes here because I was kind of curious looking who was going around him. Another guy sort of similar, skill sets is Jeremy Pena. And I was just kind of curious, you got a preference on one of those two? I feel like they're kind of similar and they're going pretty close in the ADP recently.
That's honestly a really good kind of comparison between the two, especially going next to each other. Grissom, we've never really seen him do it for a full year, which will be interesting. Pena had that good year 2 years ago. Last year is kind of a downer for sure. Feels like Pena might have a little more power than Grissom. Could be wrong. Could be very, very similar. I'd probably almost take the chance on Grissom, honestly, given the chance and go with that. Where Pena, we saw where the floor was, and it was ugly. Like you didn't want to start him at times last year.
Yeah.
Where Grissom, maybe we get a little more out of. Very, very close though. What about you? Who would you pick out of the two?
It is close. I don't know if I have a strong feeling right this second. I will admit I've kind of always been a little bit of a Pena guy. Took him quite a bit last year. Obviously didn't work out. Yeah. Still pretty young. It'll be interesting to see if he's made any improvements because, like you said, it was pretty gross for moments last year where he was just unplayable or even droppable in OCs like 12-teamers. So, but yeah, I think it'll be kind of fascinating to see where Vaughn kind of climbs now that the Red Sox have backed him, and obviously, nothing's changed in his profile last year where everybody was taking him. I think well before this with Atlanta, right? I don't think he was going lower than this. So.
Yeah, I'll be very interested too. Like I was a big Pena guy as well last year. I felt that pain quite a bit. So, well, maybe that's part of my my answer there, but we'll see.
It is hard to forget some of those deep cuts, right?
Yes, definitely. But it's also a good point you make, and I try to keep that reality is still super young. There's like it could have been the league adjusting to him. Does he adjust back? There's a lot of things along those regards. Now we got a couple like kind of boring ad drops or hot stove moves here. But we can just highlight them real quick if you want. Chris Flexen joins the White Sox. I'm only mentioning him for like the deepest of formats, basically, and just to prove the fact that the White Sox, they're filling their roster, sort of, kind of, maybe.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Do you even have any interest like in a guy like Flexen? At worst, he's going to eat innings up. So You got that,
Yeah.
but ADP of like 744.
I mean, again, when we're talking that deep, right? I think the name I always put down in these DCs, it's like a Jordan Lyles type, right? Like
Yep.
I've drafted those types of guys late, and for a reason of you're trying to plan for injuries. Like you said, eat innings, because we all know we've had those DC teams that, before you know it, you're like, man, I have nobody to start this week. And obviously you still need to try to accumulate volume. So to your point, that late as a guy who's just sort of a backup plan, fine. I don't think there's a lot exciting, obviously, in him from an upside standpoint, right? I mean, to your point, the White Sox, their rotation, I think Eric Fetty's listed as number 2 on roster resource.
Yes.
It just kind of tells you like where they're at right now. And this is without Cease even maybe getting moved. So like he's probably going to find some starts, I guess is what I'm saying. So again, that has value, especially that late. So I have no problem if he's, going at 700 and you want to throw him on your bench like that, I guess. But
Yeah, because like you look at who he's going around, it's either potential prospects that might get called up or like 6th or 7th inning relievers that maybe find saves at some point. So it's, do you want innings and potential maybe get in there for a win? White Sox might not win many games, but I'm with you. I like taking those boring guys that can just give me innings at times. I've done a lot of Jordan Lyle types in my day, so I'm with you there.
You just unfortunately, it's going to come, right? There's going to be that time where you're like, 2-star Jordan Lyle, here we go. Like you just cross your fingers and hope they don't destroy you.
Just check back on Sunday and see how it went.
Pretty much.
This one really doesn't do anything for me, but does Zach Plesac joining the Angels have any interest for you? Like I've been anti Zach Plesac for a long time, but maybe that's just me.
I'm with you, man. I got a good buddy that used to be a Guardians fan, and we used to debate about Plesac a lot, and I think he's terrible. I think he had 8 good starts ever in his career, and he's not that guy anymore. He's not throwing 95, and he's still young enough, I guess, but there's nothing for me to think, I don't know, that he's going to be anything. His K- walk is dreadful. I don't know. I don't think if I had to bet, I'd guess he's just not in the majors again more than he's actually relevant at all this year, but
I'm with you. Once you do a puka shell necklace video and it's not the early 90s, you kind of lost out on this one. So
that video did hurt him in my book too. Dropped him in the
ADP. And he really never bounced back after that. So
you make a good point there. I mean, decisions have consequences, and I think that necklace is the root of his problem.
On and off the field. On and off the field, people. It's very simple. We'll combine these two, but you can talk about them both separately if you want, because earlier, like a week ago, Yuki Matsui signs with the Padres, and everyone's like, sweet, they got their closer. Sorry, Robert Suarez. And then yesterday, on Wednesday, they went and signed Wook Suk Go, who was one of the best closers in Korea. Now he's supposed to be their closer. So it just keeps getting better and better out there. What's your kind of level of interest on these two? Maybe they both get saves. Like I actually read some things on Go yesterday that were on Twitter, some good threads on it. Looks pretty darn good, but so did Matsui.
Okay.
So what's your thoughts on these two? It was weird to see San Diego get both of them.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure, like, to your point, why they signed him after just getting Matsui, and I'll be completely honest, I don't know a lot about either one of them, obviously, other than just looking at their stats. It's not as if I've actually watched these guys pitch. I haven't seen Go. I know you mentioned he looked good. I wasn't like overly impressed with just his base, like his whip and stuff. It was a little, sketchy for maybe a closer type. Matsui, I think his last 3 years in Japan were just pretty good, just based on the numbers. Again, what that means, I don't know in the MLB. So, I mean, if you made me pick, I would still probably lean Suarez. I mean, he did get paid like 46 mil. He throws gas. He's kind of that prototypical possible closer. So if you made me pick one, I'd probably go with him. And I think him and Matsui have been going. I think Matsui's actually been going ahead of him lately.
Yeah, I just pulled up Matsui's ADP over the last month. ADP's 295. He got as high as 129.
Yeah, I did see that.
Someone just that was probably right after he got signed.
The panic pick. Yep.
Yeah. Now he's like, oops. Where Robert Suarez 218, he's gone as high as 185. So that's interesting. And now if we go with Go, there's a lot. Search something more than just. There we go. Wusuk go 715 as high as 549. So people are still catching up to him.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that climbs here in the next couple weeks. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be. Obviously, you never know how some of the drafts play out, right? If it's in the 200 range and you need a third closer, close your eyes and take a pick. Again, I'd probably lean Suarez, but I'd probably just try. I mean, I think of who would you rather have, Suarez or somebody like Alvarado on the Phillies, kind of going in the 180, 200 range, both uncertain on their jobs, but I think Alvarado's pretty elite.
Yeah.
Just a matter of how many saves does he actually get,
Yeah, I go Alvarado. At that point, I'm hoping that's my third reliever if I'm going that direction.
Yeah.
But I'd probably go Alvarado just for the eliteness that he has, and I'll take those little things even in DCs like we talk about, just having the ratios and the strikeouts. Those are amazing. If he can run into 10 to 15 saves, awesome. So yeah,
he was huge last year. Even
Yep.
He got hurt, but he still gave you elite production, honestly, from where you got him, especially.
Yeah, so I'd probably go Alvarado in that range, but I'm really looking forward, like you said, I want to see where the three-headed San Diego monster starts kind of unraveling in ADP over the next month. It'll be real interesting and then see when we get to the big boy drafts how that takes place.
And then you mentioned earlier with spring training, that just opens up a whole other can of worms of overreaction, right? I mean, the littlest thing sparking a
trying to decipher pitcher usage when who threw the fourth
inning
and who threw the fifth.
Oh yeah. And then the GM says one thing, and then
yeah, it'll get wild. And because the Padres were rough when they had Melanson, and I think it was Will Smith back then. They had two guys or something, and Melanson ended up being the closer, even though the whole time he was supposed to be the eighth inning guy. Then he showed up the last day they announced him as the closer, so that was a fun one. So go Padres. Last bit of news here: Harrison Bader signed with the New York Mets, got him $10.5 million over a year, which kudos to him. But the reason I'm really curious on this is besides, the power, a little bit of power, some speed, which he brings to the table, and he's a really good glove, which makes it interesting. They said, I think it was the GM came out and said it today, that expect Nimmo to continue to play, but Bader to play a lot in center field. So how does this play out for you in a fantasy perspective? Are you now interested in Bader? Does it worry you on Nimmo? How do you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it makes me concerned about Nimmo. I don't know. He's such a Nimmo forever couldn't stay healthy, but he's such a I feel like underrated source of runs for the last few years. He's he gets on base. Obviously, he's got some guys that can drive him in behind him. Feel like always slightly underrated, but with Bader, I haven't looked at his AP, I guess. And again, like we've been saying with a few of these guys, it'll be interesting to see what happens here now that he's gotten paid a decent amount. And to your point, his glove is pretty elite, and that's going to play, or at least keep him in the lineup most of the times as long as he's healthy. And that's been his big thing too, right? Is can he just not get hurt? Because I think, later in a DC, he's still a guy who can get you 20 some steals, and that has a lot of value later in drafts because they're just a lot of the guys that get you those 20 steals. Maybe they don't play every day, so their counting stats are bad or whatever. And not that I expect his to be great, but yeah, I'd have to see where his ADP lands, to really kind of gauge what my interest might be on him. But I feel like I've been burned on him in the past, so I feel like I just want to shy away because I got sucked into the hype a year or two ago, and he just doesn't hit the ball hard anymore. Or, I don't know if he ever really did, but his hitting metrics are pretty poor. But if you need some steals, worth a dart throw, I guess maybe.
Yeah, in a DC I'm in, probably not in any Fab League. Bader's ADP is 397. He's gone as high as 286, which kudos to that. I was looking at him as a deep bench outfielder at times. Nimmo 194 as high as 178. So that kind of checks out. But Bader, I'm still probably not too excited about. Before we go on to the next segment here, our buddy Anthony Gialdi is in the chat, and he mentions, I don't appreciate the snipe in the 9th round of our DC, Nikolai. He mentioned it got his ass good. Not sure which pick that was, but anytime we can get Anthony Gialdi on here, that's always fun.
Yeah, no, he is in our draft. Yeah, we're doing a second. I believe, let me just make sure I am not misquoting the pick here. Okay, it was who I thought. Okay, so I took Jackson Churio. I needed, I needed the sexy pick, right? So I did take him, and I think I saw Gialdi took maybe Jordan Walker after that. So I still went with a little bit of a young, promising bat. So
Beautiful. Yeah, it's always fun. Gialdi's always fun in the chat here, so it's good to see that snipe come in handy. Let's get to know you a little more. I know you've been on a few shows. Waxman has had you a few times. It's been good, but let's get to know you here on the Bench with Bubba side of things. How long have you been playing fantasy baseball, or guess NFBC? Because I know you've been playing for quite some time.
yeah, I did a couple of years ago. My brother-in-laws actually who play. They were like, hey, I usually just play in like friends leagues and stuff like that, work leagues at ESPN, whatever. And they were just kind of talking about NFBC and, the competition and just like, little that added layer, I think, of, bigger leagues and that's, just the types of players that you get more over there in those work leagues. I don't know if you play in them, you always have a couple of guys who aren't paying attention. So, so I think that was in 2020. I just did one and I just honestly instantly got hooked. And then the last 3 years and try to tell myself this year that I'm going to scale it back a little bit. We'll see how, I feel like we all lie to ourselves, right? As the draft season, like this is the year I'm only going to do. And, but I don't know, I've probably been doing around 20 leagues, I guess, over the last 3 years on average. So, I don't know, it's just always fun to be in a draft, right? We were talking about this beforehand. It's just addicting, but.
Yeah, and we only get to do it for a few months, and then it goes away. We have to grind our ass off for 6 months with no drafting.
Well, then in Fab Leagues, then the suffering happens, right? On Sunday, you start to hate your life.
Exactly. That's why, at least right now, they're not Fab Leagues unless you're real crazy to be doing Fab Leagues. And so you can kind of, you at least tell yourself in your head, it's got a set lineups. It's not that bad. Like, we'll be okay.
Right. I know. Once
then,
I've held off in an OC. I know they've started, and I was like, man, that sounds fun. But like, just be patient, man. Like, because I know once I start doing those two, it won't stop. But
yeah, I reserved my 3 OCs already, and then now I get the emails every time Derek wants to get a group in, and then like, hey, Thursday night we have this one, or on Friday, I'm like, no, don't do it to me, Derek. I'm waiting a little bit longer. Come on, like I want to at least get to February. I usually prefer to get all those in March, but I know better than that. I'll be in one at least in February. But how do you usually? You said 20 teams. How do you usually kind of break that down? Do you prefer to do some DCs, then you get to OCs? You mentioned you had a couple mains. Like, how do you usually or ideally want to break all that down?
Yeah, it's varied a little bit, but for the most part, I feel like I've been doing. I don't know why I landed on this. The last 3 years, I've done right around 12 or 13 OCs each year. Just kind of where it's ended in kind of a good spot for me, I guess. On top of that, I think I've been doing probably 5-6 DCs. I did a few gladiators last year. I did not do any this year. I was a little late to the party on that, but and then usually just one main. So I've only done 2 mains ever the last 2 years. So mostly, I guess, OCs and then a decent amount of DCs along the way. So,
so you do 5 to 6 DCs, and you're primarily an OC guy, so we have similarities there. What makes you? What are you utilizing the DCs for? It's always a fun question to me, at least, because some people say it's to learn the player pool. Some say it's to do this, that, or the other. What are you trying to gain by using and the DCs being a 15 compared to, so obviously more money's involved compared to an NFBC 50, which is a 12. So you're using the 15 to get ready for the 12s, or what's your kind of process there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I kind of am. I understand they're not apples to apples, right? You're talking 15, you're talking 12. You're talking 50-man benches with, an OC is definitely much shallower benches. You have fab, so there's a lot of differences. But for me, I do like jumping in these slow drafts now and just starting to grind and get a feel for what a draft's going to look like, just in general. I mean, you can do the research, but I think until you get in one and you start to see where guys fall and how you maybe want to do your build this year, it always takes me a few to maybe pin down what I feel comfortable with, and then maybe I'll try to copy that with a lot of my drafts moving on. But early on, I mean, I did my first DC. I got to be honest, I was like not a huge fan of how it turned out. We'll see what happens, but just didn't kind of love the approach. We'll see as I do a few here. I think I'm getting a little bit better of a feel on what I at least think is a decent approach this year. But that's kind of what I do use them for. I mean, I enjoy them. Obviously, I want to win, but I kind of use them as that starting point, right? So when I get into an OC, even though it's a 12, I just have a rough idea. And obviously, those are so much different with,
Oh yeah.
What approach you want to take, and they're kind of all over the place sometimes, which makes them fun. But
Yep. No, that's what I was wondering because I used to do primarily 50s and I did a couple DCs and it's nice to, if you win a DC, like the payout's pretty solid in those to help kind of build your bankroll situation.
Yeah,
So that's why I started going, okay, I'll play a little more DCs potentially than 50s. But like I haven't done a 50 since early on. I did a couple DCs. I just jumped in a 50 with some buddies, and that is just like a different world again. Like it's just like going back in,
sure.
just drafting a 12 compared to a 50. It's nuts. But you say usually 12 to 13 OCs. Now this is where I'm gonna get real curious.
Sure.
They get wild, like you said. Things can
Oh,
there's really
it's
there's
the
no
wild,
method.
wild west, man.
Yes, there's no method to the madness. We're not even talking fab yet. We'll get to that in a minute. We're just talking the draft. And like everybody has their own way to go about it. It gets nuts.
Mhm.
You're doing 12 to 13. Do you do that many to diversify a ton and try different strategies, or what's kind of your idea? Or is it just I'm going to load in and do 12 to 13? What's your plan on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm typically one that I like to have fun with some of the builds in those. So I'm not again. I know some people are a little bit more, you know, um, tried and true on like the way they want to go about it, or they're a little less risk averse. I don't mind trying like quote unquote a different build, whatever that might be to somebody. I'm not afraid. I always use the example a couple years ago, and it's obviously not something I would ever do again. It just worked out where I took 3 shortstops in the first 4 rounds,
Hmm.
and I know I would not ever do that again, but in my opinion, I was trying to build the best team,
Hmm.
and, locking up your util with a shortstop, again, I would not do it moving forward, but I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna do this. I wanna see how it works out." And all I'll say is whether it's a right way to do it or not, we know there's a million ways to build this puzzle and try to win. And it didn't hurt me in the league. I got second. And my point is, you can do it so many ways that, I understand it's maybe not ideal, but I kind of like just trying I don't know, little different approaches. But then within that, I do usually try to identify maybe 5 or 6 guys that I'm kind of in love with. And I'll just almost jump their ADP just to make sure I'm getting them in the drafts or try to, right? Like if there's 5 or like last year, Corbin Carroll, I think I took him in 10 of my DCs or OCs
Okay.
because I was just like, I'm getting this guy, like he's going to steal way more than his projections. And at least that was my thought, right? Obviously, you never know. It worked out. It doesn't always work out that way. You can get burned by going all in on a guy, of course. But I also think in the OCs, I don't know, your thought is if you ever look back at those drafts, it always makes me laugh at the end of the year. I'm like, man, that team won the league and the draft was awful. Like
Yep.
you whiff on, or at least on my teams, like you whiff on so many picks, but it just shows you that Fab obviously plays a huge factor. And if you get a difference maker, a true difference maker, a guy that pops, it goes a long ways in helping your team, right? So even if you whiff on a lot and you get 2 or 3 just absolute studs who are, top 12, 15 players, it carries your team. So I don't know if I kind of rambled on there, but that's sort of my approach in those season. What I like to
It
try to do.
makes sense, and that's one thing reason I like the DOCs a lot. I talk about it is you can, I don't know if get away with more is the right way to say it, but you can definitely obviously take more chances. Like in a 15, like in a main, like you did a main, you said, you almost have to be more structured, more I would safe's not the right word, but you have to make sure you cover your bases because to do like say you did 3 shortstops in a main, you'd be hosed somewhere. Like somewhere
Oh yeah,
like we talk about 15s, there's always a weakness on a team because 15s are so deep. You would have a massive weakness somewhere, like outfield or something. That would be just a
a hundred
disaster
percent.
because of it. Where in an OC, between just the pool being so much smaller, between other people taking crazy chances, and between the fab, like that's what makes it fun. I love the fact in OCs, you at least have options almost every week in fab to improve your team. Like there's always
For
something there.
sure.
We're in a main. There's some weeks you look at the waiver wire and you're just like, what am I going to do? Like this is ridiculous.
It's gross. Yeah.
So that's what I always go back to. Fantasy supposed to be fun. OCs make it fun at least. Like they can be annoying as hell,
Yes.
especially when you see fab results. But at least
Oh
it's
man.
fun.
That's, I think, my favorite thing on the Fab, besides seeing who you got, right, is going through and seeing the highest bids for the hot
Yes.
player that week, because they're just all over the place. It's like that guy went for $600 somewhere. Like what?
Yes.
And
What league was that?
yeah, right. Like,
Can you give me that player's name? I want to sign up next year.
and to your point, I think so far I haven't done that great in the two mains I did. And I think I'm still kind of trying to figure out,
Mhm.
Nicholi, don't be so wild, I guess, in your approach in those ones, because like you said, you can't get away with it as much, especially if those picks don't hit. Um,
Mhm.
and those early picks, the first 10 rounds matter a ton if you get some safer plays. And I mean, still you want upside, of course, but
Yeah,
I think that's
definitely.
where I need to cool it a little more in the mains, and why it's kind of backfired on me so far. But
Yeah, but drafting's fun. You gotta have fun. It when we're talking these OCs though, like we joked about Fab. How do you do that many Fab leagues each week?
yeah, man, that's a really good question. It's I think I enjoy it usually the first, I want to say, month, right? It's kind of fun. Um, and then there's a breaking point, right? Like you're
Yep.
sitting there, and even if you're not doing 13, you're just like my wife will look at me and be like, just see the look on my face, like it's like a job. You're just like, I got to go work now
Pretty
on
much.
Sunday, and
Yep.
yourself in a room, and you're just, for me, you have your process, whatever it is, and I'm just like, by the end of it, I'm trying to stay focused, right? Because that's just, any of us, I think, that are into it this much, you care enough to try hard all the way through, and it matters, right? If you want to do well, but man, it gets hard at the end, right? To stay focused all year in those, when you're placing those bids on Sunday night, you're just like, man, I want to just do something tonight and not spend 5 hours doing this.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is it's like this is Sunday. I want to go have fun. I want to go do this, or especially like you said,
Right.
like early on. Okay, you got your plan. You're into it. You do this, that. But as the season goes on, summer gets going, weather gets nicer. It's like it's
Yeah,
good. It's
I
just
know.
it's so much more difficult.
And I live here in North Dakota, so obviously, like, I mean, this winter's been decent, but winters are kind of keeping you trapped in until when baseball starts. So when it is nice, it is hard on those Sundays to, sit on your laptop for 4 or 5 hours, doing this thing. And I always laugh, like, when we talk about, well, how'd your year go? And, if you're profitable or not. And then you do the math. It's like, yeah, I was profitable. And you do the math, and it's like, I made 10 cents an hour on my, you know,
Yes.
million hours that I invested into this crazy
Yeah.
game that we love, right?
That's yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I've done little exercises like that. It's very depressing at times thinking back about it.
Yeah.
Like when people say, like, "What did you do with your life?" Well, honestly, I did this.
Right.
But it's why we love it. It's fun. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's interesting. So I'm with you. It's good to hear. I like hearing that because there's the Tobys of the world. Great, I'm a great friend with Toby, and Steve Weimer and DPH and all those guys, like the robots guys, and they spend hours and hours going through the fab process and going through the numbers and all these things. I'm like, I remember Ryan and I left one of the conferences at FPAS and walked out and said, "We're never going to win." Because we're just like, there's no way we could spend that much time doing it, which is not
Yeah,
true. You can still win, but it's just
yeah.
like, man, it's
Yeah,
wild
some guys are
watching
super, their approach is definitely very smart, and they take it to another level with just sort of the commitment, right? And I like to
all.
think I'm committed, but I'm with you on, um, I don't pretend to be, maybe the best with, the advanced stats and, super, which I don't ground. I look at all of it. It's just some guys understand it and, um, apply it a lot better than somebody like me, at least, I think. So,
No, I'm 100% with you. I joke about it all the time because it's true with me. It's like I joke, I do caveman analytics. That's just what I do. So,
dude,
um,
I'm still like, and I know Vlad's the gut guy, but I'm that type of person too, that I'm just like,
100%.
go with the gut. I'm like, love this guy. I don't care if anybody backs my reasoning. I'm in. And, it doesn't always work out, but
Yeah, I make my rankings, and I obviously I look at the numbers, I look at things, I make rankings. But some of these guys like go deep into it. I'm like, there's a point where I was looking at like three guys, and my gut says this is 1, 2, and 3. That's how we're doing it. Like, 'cause
yep,
I'm not gonna give you a rhyme or a formula why, but this is what it is. And that's how we
100%.
roll. Yeah, no, that's funny stuff. Do you play in any of is it all 350 OCs, or do you go up to the big boys like 750s and whatnot? Like, basically, do you go to Vegas or to any live drafts?
Yeah, I haven't done anything other, higher in the OCs than the 350. I've thought about it. We'll see this year. I went to Vegas 2 years ago to do a main. My brother-in-law had a 40th down there. It was a good time, and it happened to be when the main or the live events were going on. So super fun to do the one main in person, meet a few people. Not going this year. I don't know if you are, or if you.
Yeah.
I don't think you were there that year.
I've never been.
Okay,
no, never been. They don't have events in my price point yet.
do you do any mains? I guess I haven't.
No, I've never done a main because it's just
Okay.
I've done 15s and I've done okay in some. Most of the time, it's middle of the pack stuff. Like I just know my world, and
Sure.
someday I will. I'm not going to say I'm not going to. I just love my little OC bubble. I guess like kind of things we talk. I just love that kind of format and just doing my thing there. Someday I'll do it. Like Gialdi in the chat said, do a solo shot. I'm thinking about it. The format of the solo shot I like a lot, but also little tweaks of it I don't like as much type thing. But
yeah,
it's a good. I wish the solo shot was a solo entry, but the same format is what I would love to see. That's what I'm hoping for. But
yeah, and I'm with you in the
someday.
OCs. I think, and maybe it's maybe my, like we were talking and joking, the caveman.
Mhm.
I like being able to do stupid things and not get burned by it
Mhm.
as much. So in an
Exactly.
OC, it's like, oh, that sucked, and you're an idiot, Nikolai. But I can maybe bounce back. Where in
Yes.
15s, like it's different. And then again, some of the people that are really good in those formats are, they're such advanced players too, that they're going to take advantage of you and kind of
100%.
bury you in the standings. But
Yeah, Torres makes a comment. How about a main qualifier? Maybe I'll take you up on that one, Torres. That's not a bad idea. Get the feet wet in a main qualifier. That's a good idea. We'll see how that goes.
there you
Just
go.
add more to my leagues. Thank you. You're helping out with the addiction. I appreciate you.
Got to scratch that itch, man.
Exactly. It's a big itch on this guy. So we talked about the formats you like. You got your DCs, you got your OCs. You dabble in the main. Do you do any auctions, or it sounds like it's all just redrafts?
It is so far. Yeah, I would love to do an auction here one day. I don't think
Yeah.
I'll do it this year, but I do them for football a little bit, just smaller leagues. It's a really fun format. Don't get me wrong. I just
Yeah.
haven't jumped into it, at least in the NFBC space. So.
Yeah, that's my goal this year is to jump into at least one or two of the 150 online auctions to try them out, see how I like them, because they seem just like so much fun. So
I
uh,
suppose I could sneak in one of those. That's
yeah, hey, I'll
easy
let you
enough, right?
know. I'll send you the bat signal. We'll have some fun.
There we
It'll
go.
be good. We can
See,
all learn.
and I'm
We can all learn it together.
I peer pressure. I just don't handle well.
Yeah,
I'm just like
that's me too. That's like
twisted my arm. I'm like, all right, let's do it.
yeah, and then the thing is, this could get me ready for a main because after you do the draft, now it's a 15-team league, so now you get to dance.
There you
So
go, man.
there you go. What are your plans for 2024? Similar 12 to 13 OCs and whatnot, or do you plan on doing? I know I just added an auction on your list. Do you have anything else planned
I
this
would
year?
like, and I know I'm probably full of shit here, but I would like to do a little less on the OCs, just from the mental standpoint, right? Like we talked
Yeah,
about. I mean, whether I do or not, I guess time will tell. But definitely probably more OC still. I'll probably, my second DC up, probably try to do 5 or 6.
yeah,
Just because they're, like we said, leading up to like opening day and stuff. It's fun to be in one. Yeah, I'll probably do a main. I think I'm going to try to sign up, or I will sign up probably for the new League of Champions. Or sorry, I'm trying to think of
yeah,
the phrasing. So if I'm going to do an OC and a main, anyways, obviously it I think
yeah.
makes
You're
sense
almost there,
to
anyways. Now you have to do an auction. See, now you're in. That's part of
exactly.
it.
So it seems cool, and it's a pretty didn't Toby kind of run with that
Toby's.
or start that?
Yep. Toby
And it's a
created it.
cool idea. So it's great to see that. I think there's already over 70 people in it, and um, be interesting to see how high that goes since there's still plenty of time before obviously opening day. And yeah, so I'll try to maybe say like under double digits in the OC, just because like I said, I know by the end of this year I took almost football off because I just was like, I need to
Exhausting.
I need to just enjoy watching football for this year, and not that Fabs is hard in football, but it's kind of nice to spend your Sundays actually watching the games.
I feel you. I used to do football content. I cut that out like 3 years ago. I just play in some leagues with my buddies now. I think besides doing the podcast with Bloomfield and like some of these bench with Bubba's, I didn't do anything baseball wise for the whole entire postseason. I'm just chilling. Like it's time to
Yeah,
relax because
yeah,
Like, you love doing fantasy baseball, playing fantasy baseball, but man, 6 months, it kicks you in the balls. By the end of it, you're just
100%.
you're
Oh,
just
for sure.
it's rough. So, I'm with you on that much. Let's get into kind of you mentioned you've done one DC. You're in your second one right now. You said the first one was kind of like you weren't totally sad. What was it that just, it doesn't have to be pick by pick, but just kind of roughly,
Sure.
what was it that made you kind of feel like uneasy or not like thrilled with how it went?
Yeah, I think like my, like you said, without going through every pick, I think my offense is actually really good or has a chance to be really good. But that was sort of the way I drafted, so I hope it would kind of turn out, you know, nice on paper in a sense. I think I started with like it was pick 14, and I had like Judge, Jose, and Michael Harris. I think were like my first three picks. Um, so overall, I mean, I was like very happy with sort of the balance and stuff of those hitters, of course. But then my pitching, I just didn't. I think it's my pitching. I think it can be fine, but I think there's some holes and some areas of concern. And we'll see what it plays out. I think Pablo was my SP1 in that one. And I think Pablo's really good. There's a lot of things to like
Yeah.
about him, but I know he's kind of polarizing, right? With do you believe, some people still don't want to give him the credit on the health, even though it's been 2 years. But man, his numbers are pretty legit, I think. But I think that one was, like I said, a good feeler for, I don't know if I loved going a little header heavy. I think I maybe prefer getting a little bit more pitching earlier on. We'll see if I feel that way still in a month, but yeah. So the second one, needless to say, I went a little bit more pitcher early on. So
Yeah, and that's why I love doing these as well. And that's kind of the point we were talking about, is doing these to kind of prep you for the main draft season. It's not just the old cliche, we're learning the player pool. It's more about learning how we want to draft, which is in the same essence, learning the player pool. But I'm with you. The drafts, I always tell myself, okay, let's just do like 3 or 4 hitters early and see how it goes. Obviously, at 12 will be different, probably
yeah,
doable. But when you're
right.
doing that when you do that DC, even after the second hitter, you start looking at that pitcher pool and you're like, oh crap, like this is getting interesting, because you got to start taking closers earlier too, because you need at least one to get the saves. Like, so
Yeah.
that changes things where you can be different in an OC as well.
And
But
in a
yeah,
DC with 15, depending on where you're picking, right? You always are kind of doing that dance on, is a run going to happen as soon as I pick? Like it picked 14 in my first one, right? That's a long ways before it gets back to you. And then all of a sudden, if you think, let's say you're waiting on that first closer, and then 2 guys after you decide to take one, the room panics, and then 6 of them are gone before it gets back to you. Those are always the things you kind of have to, you know, balance out and, try to analyze as best you can, which is impossible sometimes, but
yeah, you're almost forced. You're forced to do things in those leagues, and I've noticed that in the early drafts I've done. I've already said it, like especially in 15s, 12s, whatever. 15s, I hate being on the ends. Like being first, sure, you get Acuna, that's awesome. But as the draft
yep,
goes on, that sucks again. Like as the draft goes on, but that back
yep,
end, you get that early double tap again, nice. But as that draft goes on, you really feel, I think it feels like you're handcuffed into doing things you might not normally do, and that's
totally agree.
it's
So
making
have
me
you
already
in
want a
yours,
middle
have you
pick.
been, it sounds like you've been liking getting a little pitching earlier on. I mean, like getting a good
Yeah,
base. Yeah.
at least no more than 2 hitters early, if not only 1 hitter early. It depends, obviously, on what's going on. But I want to make sure I'm trying to get like no one past Pablo. I want one of those top guys, Pablo or better. But
Sure.
probably a top 5 guy would be great. We all say that, of course. But it just gets really murky really quick. And I don't know. We'll see. Like I'm starting to think my KDS is going to be, after the top like couple picks, it's going to be, I want to be in the middle. So I've been kind of almost leaving it like butter when
Yep.
it's been going, because I prefer, if I'm going to get the turn, make it my last options. But yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see
I'm
how
picking
it
8
goes.
in this one, and I've kind of liked it just based on what we said, right? On the not being on the ends, and you don't have as far getting back to each round. And so far, I definitely like it way better in the end. But um,
Yeah, minus drafting next to Gialdi, it's probably pretty fun. So that's always good.
yeah, I think
Um,
is he right next to me? I mean, he might be 2 picks away, but yeah, we are pretty close. So and that's always interesting in these rooms too. If
yeah,
players that are, I think everybody's drafting is pretty locked in, but certain players that pay attention more than others, and you kind of start to get in your head about that too. Like, man, if I pass him up here, that guy's probably going to take him, or possibly right,
yeah.
just because we all kind of listen to the same stuff, or maybe have.
Well, yeah, over the last few years, as NFBC continues to grow, it's like now we all kind of know who each other are. When we see who's in the draft room, we have a good idea at least who probably 2/3 of the room is. And you're just like, oh, great,
And
sweet,
then
this is
there's
gonna
always
be
the new
fun.
guy who's like super
Hmm.
smart and you just don't know it yet.
Yep, 100%. It's like, we'll all know you by the end of the year now. Sounds good. So like,
Yeah,
you
no
just
doubt.
joined the chat, and yeah, there's a lot of that. So that's like the blessing of the curse. I guess it's getting more and more popular, more and more fun because the format's amazing, but it's just like showing it's getting tougher and tougher at the same time, drafting with the same
Oh, no doubt.
smart people over and over again. So you kind of hinted at starting pitching. You want to get a little earlier. What's your kind of thoughts on just starting pitching as a whole? Like there's that big kind of glob in the middle that people talk about. So there's options, but you have to like kind of go through the minefield.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I kind of said what you were just saying, like, in a perfect world, I think right now, at least in a DC, getting a top five, whatever your rankings are, guy is ideal, right? In this draft, I took Strider at 8. I mean, obviously, we know like what his upside and stuff is, but because I think looking at it, it gets very interesting in like 40 to 80 range, right? I think there's so many guys that are kind of polarizing and have different questions and different, all have some upside, right? And but it's just a matter of who do you trust, whether it's Scooble, right? Who's all the advanced stuff say it was legit, it was amazing, and are you buying into it? Kodai, you have Bobby Miller, you have all those young guys. Like, who do you like the most? It's just you have Aaron Nola, who is a yo-yo like every other year. It seems like who you getting? Logan Webb, who's like always undervalued. It seems like it's just a crazy group. I think,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying that one of those guys can't be your ace, but I think if you can get one of the Strider, Cole, Wheeler, Burns, whoever it is, I think just might make your life a lot easier, and then kind of figure it out from there. But
Yeah, it's one thing we always learn each year, like different things we did right, did wrong. And one thing for me is always like, not saying we don't prioritize it or I didn't prioritize it, but it's like more of an emphasis this year to get the strikeout guys early. That's like,
yeah,
because it's just so hard with these, like you mentioned, like the 40 to 80 range. There's very interesting guys, very, very interesting guys. But even all those guys you mentioned, how many of them are giving you the kind of strikeouts those early five guys are giving you? Probably like it's just a gap. It's a big gap as it starts to
yeah.
stretch out, and it doesn't sound like much. But if you want to win your league, okay. If you want to win the overall, though, big difference. And that's just the kind of thing I'm learning.
And that's why when we talked about Giolito earlier, that's why you might be forced to take a guy like him, or we joked about
Mhm.
Lance Lynn, but just because you get that late, and if you're looking at your team and you're like, oh man, I'm light on Ks, you might be
Yep.
forced to take a guy that you're not comfortable with that could really hurt your ratios. I mean, maybe they'll bounce back, but that's kind of
Yep.
the spot you might put yourself in if you don't, like you said, grab one of
100%.
those 200K guys. But
Yep, that's the fun part. How do you approach the relief pitching world? Because I mentioned kind of earlier in these draft and holds, we see relief pitchers go earlier because you obviously can't fab guys throughout the year. But it seemed like
mhm.
there were so many more guys that were stuck in their job last year, which kind of makes a little more, I guess, comfortability. I don't know if that's true or not. So, how do you look at
Mhm.
the relief pitcher world so far?
Yeah, I feel like this year, and again, it's only 2 drafts. I feel like last year was a little more like got to get a top guy, and I think obviously the top guys are still elite for obvious reasons, and I'm not saying it's a bad pick necessarily. Um, I think though in the current draft I'm in my first one too, I was kind of surprised that Ryan Presley. I get he's a
Mhm.
little older. He's going in late round 7,
Yep.
or at least in this one he did. And to me, that's just a great pick still. I mean, all of his stuff, whatever you want to look at, was still pretty elite last year. And he's on a great team. And I don't have too many concerns outside if you want to play the age card, I guess. But
Mhm.
I just think if you can get a guy like him even as your first closer and try to figure out by getting, a couple bats and a couple SPs before, I kind of like
Mhm.
that idea at least. I mean, it doesn't mean it's always going to work out for you if you go in that way, but um, again, obviously there's the elite guys up top like Hader and stuff who I'm sure they'll do great, right? But I'm not sure I want to pass up on some of the other guys at different positions in that range right now. But I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, that's one of the big reasons I like doing these early drafts is kind of getting a feel for that. And again, like we kind of mentioned, in a fab league, it'll change a bit. In the mains or a 15, maybe not as much, just because again, finding the waiver wire, but OC's different world.
Yeah.
Um, but I always get a little more aggressive on the relievers, and I'm starting to want to like maybe try a draft where maybe I wait till Presley's my reliever at 1, and then use
Mhm.
those, use that 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick on another plug starting pitcher or bat, stuff like that. I want to see how that kind of build turns out as the draft goes on, and that's definitely something because you said it kind of surprised you, and you look at a lot of those guys. There's a good chunk of guys that could run into 25 to 30 saves that are falling, and if you could snipe like some of those, that gets interesting as well.
Yeah, and in this one, I didn't myself get Presley. I was kind of like shaking my head when I saw he went that late. I think I took Duran in
Mhm.
round. I don't know if he was. I think he was like pick 50 something. So I'm not saying like for sure I'm going away because obviously you get a guy like that who should be elite ratios and stuff. And we were just talking about that with like the Alvarado types. It helps tremendously. But yeah, I think to your point, there's like Clay Holmes, Alzolay,
Mhm.
a lot of these
Yeah.
guys in like the 100 to 120 Phillips that could get 25 saves and still put up pretty good numbers. It's just, now I'm trying to figure out in this draft, like, where do I want to attack my second closer? That's always,
That's like if you waited, do you need to be more aggressive on number 2 type thing? That's always the fun
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Or do you go
because,
and get like or do you go get like an Alvarado and somebody else later that could, piece it together maybe? That's the fun puzzle.
yeah, it's like, and then do you take, because then there's always the leftovers that are the last few closers that quote unquote have the job, but it's like, do you trust the skill set? Are they going to keep it like the Kyle Finnegans? Like those guys, like how much do you believe? And that's where it gets kind of interesting too at the end. Or do you just wait and take like the upside arms, like that could potentially win a job, as the year goes on. So
Hey, no pressure here, but Gioli's in the chat saying you're way up. You can make your pick live on the air if you'd like, or you can wait till later. Up to you. I'm not going to pressure
oh,
you, but Gioli
ooh,
says you're on the clock. So,
I'm on the clock here. We can do it quick. I think I had a guy in mind here.
what round are you
Uh,
in? 10,
this
11?
is round 10.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take this guy because I think he is massively underdrafted right now, and he's
Yeah.
not the greatest human in the world. But uh,
Don't say Wander Franco. He's not playing this year.
I'm not taking Franco. I promise.
Okay, good.
Uh, uh, I took Ozuna. I'll
Okay,
give you my
yeah,
Ozuna pitch. I think he's one guy that's kind of baffled me so far, and maybe I'm just wrong on it, but
no,
I think that was pick like 140 something. After the first month was, I don't know, one of the like legitimately best hitters just in baseball. He's not the youngest guy, but again, elite team, phenomenal setup for him, and he was hitting the ball. It wasn't like it was fluky, I guess is what I'm saying. And
yeah,
a guy that hits 40 homers and has 100 RBIs, and he's in the Braves lineup.
yep,
Again, if you want to do the age thing, we can. I get it. Some people get more concerned about that stuff, and again, his off the field stuff, I understand it.
yep.
Obviously, not a fan of any of that, but this is fantasy, and I think the skill set still looks pretty promising. And in this build, the way I was doing, I just need some power. So I think a guy like him around 150 for me makes a lot of sense. I think the price is pretty reasonable, but
Yeah, he's a very interesting one to draft. I agree with you. If you need power, I think he's a great price or great pick at that price. I think it's a conundrum for him as people see that UT only, and
yeah,
they get stuck on that. Where I'm not one of those guys. Like I have so many JD Martinez shares right now, it's ridiculous. And I'm all in, and he's going like a 2 something because I guess he hasn't signed yet. I'm like, wherever he signs, folks, he's going to DH. If he doesn't, I will just eat that pick. That's fine. But at
yeah.
2 something, I'll take that all day long.
No,
Ozuna's just they'll be going right next to each other when he signs. Let's put it that way.
I would agree. Yeah, you have. I don't. The UT stuff doesn't bother me too much either. To be honest with you, I've never gotten too bent out of shape. I get people think it ties them up, but I think you have. I don't know. There's a lot of these power bats, like you said. JD is going to climb as soon as he signs. Ozuna,
Soler.
Soler in that mirror.
Yep.
Eloy going like.
Hmm.
I get it. He has his injury stuff, but he's like 250. I mean, this is a guy going
Yeah.
like
Wow.
75 last year or whatever. I get it. The team's not great, but 250 seems like a great chance to take a shot on a guy who still has, I think, a decent skill set. But
Yeah, and I'm with you. And the fact, like you said, Ozuna in the middle of that lineup, not bad. Not bad at all. There's be a lot of run production for Mr. Marcel in that one.
We'll see. But then I always feel like the karma gods are going to get me because I took a.
Yeah, I get it. I understand every side of those arguments. I get it, but in the end, it's your team. I play fantasy over. It's fantasy for reasons. Put it that way. That's
right.
I'm with you on that. Speaking of offense, are there any positions that stand out to you that you need to be maybe more aggressive on? Everyone says outfielder because you need 5, obviously, and those do dry up very quick. But is it outfield or is there somewhere else that you've noticed?
Yeah, I did put outfield down. That is, I guess, maybe the easy answer right now. I was kind of looking at the ADP and like, man, after like Randy and Adolis, I think they're around like 11 or 12 in the ADP, and then it goes to the Nolan Jones of the world, who actually took in this draft. But it's no for sure thing, right? Like he was great down the stretch. You see the power speed upside, and that's phenomenal, but I don't think it's any guarantee, right? And then you have Trout and, go down the list of guys. Josh Lowe, like, is he going to play every day? He's like a great season, but the Rays are going to Ray, and it's just, I don't know, just a very interesting range after that to say, man, do I trust this guy as like my first or second outfielder? Doesn't get any better from there. So, and again, I'm probably going to be doing the uphill battle because right now I have Churio as my second outfielder in this league. And obviously, I'm assuming he starts opening day, but no guarantee. And it's no guarantee that he's any good. So,
yeah, I'm with you. Outfield, you got to be aggressive on. Otherwise, you just better start piecing it together in a big way. Find those late guys, which there are, obviously, but it's not the same. First base for me as well. It's there's more to the top part of it, but it drops off pretty quickly. That's that stings as well. So first base for me would be another one to target. What type of stats maybe stand out to you early on offensively that kind of need to be maybe more aggressive on early in draft?
Yeah, I think kind of tying into us talking about some power guys here that I guess in my opinion are going in reasonable spots so far. So the counter that would be average, I guess. For me, I'm trying to maybe build that up in the first few rounds and get a few guys that I think can give me a decent base. So if I want to take a few of these guys later, whoever it is, like whatever your power bat might be that you think you can get 25, 30 homers out, but they're going to hit 240, 250. It doesn't kill me too much. So I'm probably trying to, target that in the first few rounds rather than trying to get it later. Not that there aren't a few guys, like Yandy's, you have the Jeff McNeils of the world. Like you can get some guys or, Luis later. It's just at that point, they're few and far between. And at that point, when you're battling against 15 guys, you never know when somebody's going to.
Yep. Makes it real tough. Real tough. I'm with you 100% there. That's why it's like I mentioned strikeouts with the pitchers early. I'm looking.
Yeah, I think that's a good one for pitching.
But like with hitting, I'm with you. Like I've been way more in on guys like Corey Seager this year, which I usually am not on, stuff like that, just because I don't want that hole that as you get down the draft board, which you're kind of forced into. I don't want to have to worry about it as much. So I'm with you as well.
And I'm going to sound like an idiot to all the audience here, but in this league, I took 2 shortstops in my first 4 picks. And the reason I took, and it was not planned, it was Bichette was on the board still. And
he's falling.
Felt like I felt like he was one of the last guys that, can hit me 300. That can also give me other things, right? I'm not trusting the speed. That's not why I'm taking him. If he steals again, great. But still young, and he can still hit over 300. And that was the only reason I paired him with, I think I took Lindor earlier for some power speed. But again, I don't care that there are 2 shortstops. I was just like in that spot. I wanted the best player, in my opinion, for the build I was trying to do. And I liked his batting average upside, honestly. So
no, that makes a ton of sense because he is one of those last kind of 300 hitters on the board. So definitely understand that because like you said, there's many ways to do it. And especially in a 50 rounds, you can take a couple shortstops early if you need to. And it allows you the flexibility as outfield shrinks up to fix it because you had Bichette early on. So nothing wrong with that at all. Anything else standing out to you when you look at these early drafts? We talked positions, we talked stats. Anything else standing out to you?
Yeah, I put one name down. I feel like I'm going to say this to everybody I talk to, but I'm kind of surprised, or I shouldn't say surprised, but it seems, we talked about Ozuna. I think on a greater level, when you're talking about a 50-round draft, we talk about difference makers, and at this point in the draft, and I'm going to talk about Mr. Byron Buxton. I know who everybody is. You love, or you think it's sucked in like I do. I'm a Twins fan too, so it doesn't help. But I want to believe. I want to believe that 1 year he'll play 140 games, right? But obviously, if he was going sooner, I wouldn't be pumping it up, or maybe even bringing the question up to you. But I saw, and he's UT only again, and I understand that. But around pick, I was looking 3 to 350 lately. His last 400 or 658 PAs, he's got 45 home runs. So regardless of whatever happens, if he steals or not, they probably don't want him to steal because he gets hurt. A guy that could, again, it's a big could and a big if, give you 40-some home runs that late. I love that idea. And I was a little shocked to see it was that low. And again, I just started drafting, so I'm kind of still adjusting this where some guys are going. But, again, this is a guy, even last year, I think, going in the top 100. And I know he didn't stay healthy again. But, man, I'm probably going to own way too much and then cry about this to you like sometime next year that I drafted 8 shares of Byron Buxton. But
no, I don't hate it for the fact that you're not paying the premium anymore. I hated the premium on Byron Bucks, just like you mentioned, Eloy Jimenez. We're not paying the premium in there. At least it makes it interesting. They're not your starters per se; they're your backups. I could see you on your team where you need the outfield depth. Buxton makes a lot of sense in that regard.
I think he can gain the eligibility too. I think
exactly.
I've read
they
some
want
stuff
to play
like he could play. Yeah, so like he'll probably get it as long as he stays healthy. But
they're all ifs. But the question I have for you, just while you're talking about that, we've been using DC NFBC, but there have been a few OCs drafted already where you could potentially drop a Byron Buxton if you were to get hurt or something. His ADP there is 80 picks higher. It's closer to 200. Is the juice still worth the squeeze to you? I know it's super early. It's January 4th. Long ways to go here.
She said it's around 200.
Yeah. Because you could drop him. That's kind of the perks to it.
I think I definitely would draft him, but will it be the mindset that I'm going to take him with every draft that I can? Maybe not.
Probably not. Yeah.
But again, when we talk about, and we might talk about this later, but kind of what's your mindset on some of these contests? Do you play to win the league? Do you play for an overall? Obviously, I'm not going to lie. Of course, I want to win a league. But I think in the OCs, there's different ways to approach how you can win an overall, but hitting on some players or taking shots is something I don't mind doing. So yeah, I'd probably gobble up a few shares just because at pick 200, if I drop them again, I mentioned this earlier. There's so many picks that you drop in OCs as the year goes on. Better before pick 200, even that. Yeah, you don't want too many of them, but you can get away with it. So I'll probably take the sucker bet and fall for it and again, I'll shake my head and say, when are you going to learn, I guess. But
yeah, but it's interesting. I'm even kind of like, he was straight up not even on my board last year, not even interested. But like I said, I picked 200. You start thinking, okay, what could you do here? What's going around him? You start thinking ceiling play, and that'll lead us into it. You mentioned, playing the OC, a lot of like playing any of the competitions at NFBC, they have an overall component, pretty much all of them, the main ones. And the OC, a lot of the prize pool is the overall. That's kind of the perk to it. Like only first and second get paid in an OC compared to the top 3 in other leagues. The overall gets a fat chunk of cash, and that's kind of a perk. Like it's top 50 get paid out in the overall. So that's where Buxton becomes like an overall type play. When you're playing your leagues, you mentioned you do want to win your league, but you go for the overall. When you're drafting, how does that influence your draft? I want to say.
Yeah, it's a really good question because sometimes I'm not even sure the best way to, phrase it, because obviously you can win, and I think we've seen it. You can win an overall without, quote unquote, taking the sexy pick or the hot rookie or whatever it is, right? Like these polarizing guys that jump draft boards as the year goes on, or we think are going to be. I used Corbin Carroll last year as an example. And obviously, he helped teams tremendously, regardless of where he took them. You don't have to go after those young, hot players. You can go with somebody who's just, your Paul Goldschmidt's, Freddie Freeman. I mean, Freddie Freeman, right? He's phenomenal year after year, and people never want to give him credit. And he's was the third best hitter last year or something in baseball. So, but I do kind of go that way, with a Tyler Glasnow in an OC, right? I'm probably going to take my shot on him a few different times because, outside of Strider, I don't know on a kind of stuff basis or individual, per inning basis if there's really anybody a lot better if he's healthy. Again, health is the big concern, but now he's on the Dodgers, and it would shock nobody if he could stay healthy if he won the Cy Young. So those are the types of guys I'll try to get a handful of shares in. Just if he throws 40 innings, he throws 40 innings, and I probably am dumb enough to think I can overcome it by hopefully getting a few good fab pickups throughout the year, or maybe I hit on a guy later or something. So I'm willing to go after more of the question mark guys, maybe more than others, I guess, in hopes that it works out. And again, I just keep going back to I think too many of us want to be perfect in these drafts, right? And I get it. I don't want to be wrong either. But as we know, we whiff on a lot of stuff, and that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay to, and it doesn't bother me if I take somebody and it looks stupid. It's whatever. I'll pivot and go on from there. But
100%. That's one thing I know I keep having to work on myself. Is I was always kind of too cautious in my approach. And then playing OCs for a couple of years now, I've learned, like you said, is take the chance, work on the waiver wire fab, and try to figure it out, because you might not be able to replace it one for one, but you can definitely piece it together throughout the season if you do it at the right time, drop them or whatever type situation. That's one thing, is dropping guys, just saying screw it, we're done, cutting ties. That's something at OCs. Are you good about just cutting ties right away, or is that how's that? Because that's one of my biggest weaknesses right there.
I would say it's a weakness of mine too. I'm trying to get better at it, but I think, whether it's being stubborn because you drafted the guy, you're no, it's going to happen. And you're delusional as the weeks go on, this is the week. And then, either he's hurt still or he's getting rocked. And to your point, it would have been much better if you just cut him 3 weeks ago and picked up whoever. So I am trying to get more mindful, and I think better at that, because I know there's some people who are really smart players who, they just cut, they don't think about it, and obviously it works out really well for them. But it's tough.
Yeah. The guilds taught me a lot. My very first year in the OC was the year he won the overall, and I was in that league. And
dude, I was also in that league. I don't know if you remember that.
Were?
I was in that league. Well, that was when I figured out your name was Brian, and I was okay, that's who that is.
Because that made me laugh. You keep saying the shortstop thing. Guilds is the one that took 2 first basemen out the gate with Alonso and Goldie, and just kept going with it. And but even then, that concept never crossed my mind to build the best team, like you're saying. And so just little things like that, you learn from your mistakes situation, and take chances. And the one thing he's always, when he comes on my show, we talk about a lot, is he is cold-blooded when it comes to cutting. He does not care. He will make mistakes, and he will add guys. He'll spend all his fab out the gate and just not care about it. Or I'm always kind of cautious with my fab. So how are you with fab? Are you a guy that's willing to spend $600 on a guy, or are you more of a cautious approach?
Yeah. I would. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. I'm probably a little more cautious, and I kind of like to make sure I have a decent amount in the second half, right, to play with. Last year was so wild too, right, with rookie pitchers. I felt like every week it was just we were talking about, you run to the fab links and you look at the highest bids, and it's just it's in every league. Somebody's $500 for this rookie pitcher, Bybee, Miller, whoever it was. It just felt like it was never ending. But I didn't get too many shares of a lot of those guys, at least last year. But I know it can work out, because you can, I know DeGuilds, like you said, does it, and obviously has a lot of success, because if you hit on them, then you get that full year, right, of that great production. So it's there's two different ways to definitely go about it. I'm probably, like I said, a little more conservative, wanting to keep a little bit in the bank, especially if you're in contention with, hopefully getting like 2-star guys as the year goes on, right? There's a lot of value in that, or can be, but
For sure. It's though, like you said earlier, it's the puzzle of this game we play. The draft is a puzzle, the fab is a puzzle. It's a 6-month just mind F is what I like to call it. And you gotta try to piece it all
totally is.
together. Yeah, you gotta piece it all together. But anything else you'd like to hit on here as we keep cranking up draft season, I guess, or are you good? Because this was a lot of fun chatting with you.
Yeah, no, this is a great time, man. I appreciate again you having me on and getting a chance to just like meet you and talk some baseball and kind of get the juices flowing now that talk to somebody else too, and you're just like, I don't know if are you jumping in? Are you in a DC right now? Or are you doing any more?
I'm in an
soon?
NFBC 50 right now. I'll jump into DC shortly. I
Sure.
was taking a little breather. I guess a couple guys hit me up and go, "Hey, we're all jumping in this." I'm like, okay, fine. I'll jump in. Here's $50. Take it and kind of try it out a little bit. And I'll jump back in a DC here pretty soon.
For sure.
Yep.
No, I don't think I have anything else other than that. But we'll have to jump into now that I've gotten talking to you in auction and you're doing a main event qualifier, and now we've added extra drafts to our slate.
Yeah, this is just great. That's why this year was the first year like in my goals / resolutions. I didn't even say I was cutting back. I just know better. It's never going to happen. As much as I say it, well, it's never, because I just don't say no. People ask me and I don't say no. Like it's just one of those things.
And that's the problem. Once you get to know a few people like yourself or whoever, and they happen to tweet out or message you and like jump in a draft, and like I said, I have no strength and willpower when it comes to that. So
yeah, I'm with you. But pleasure talking to you, man. We'll have to do this again sometime, and definitely see each other in the chat room or the draft rooms. I know that much. That'll be coming up here pretty soon. But make sure y'all follow Nicholi on Twitter at Nicholi Knutson, KNUTSON. I had to check it out. I'm an idiot. But everybody, thanks for listening.
You still did a much better job than Waxman at pronouncing my last name.
The bar is low in that regard. But everybody, this is Bench with Bubba, episode 623. Catch you all next time.